Hello everybody and welcome to the Keylogger section of our course. In this section or in this project we are going to create a simple keylogger that will manage to capture all the keystrokes that the target inputs. Whether they're inputting a password to their PayPal account, Facebook account, Instagram account, it doesn't matter, we will capture all of that. Even if they try something like typing in the notepad, sending messages and so on, all of those keystrokes will be captured with our keylogger. Then we can read our keystrokes and steal the information from there. Okay? Now there are two ways that we can approach creating this keylogger. One of those is that we can actually send the keystrokes over email to us, and the other one is where we can save the keystrokes inside of a file. So we're going to go with the other one because it is easier, and also because we're going to implement it and upgrade it later on throughout the course inside of our backdoor. So what we are creating in this project will be the base keylogger that we will use later on. Okay? So it will not be its final form. Let's get straight into this. Before we even begin coding, we need to do one thing, and that is we need to install Python 3 inside of our Windows environment. Now why do we need that? Well, from now on, in coding of our keylogger and our backdoor, we're going to need to actually compile the program for Windows target machines. We know that Windows machines do not have the Python installed by default, therefore we need to compile our programs to exe in order for them to be able to run on any Windows machine, okay? And in order to compile that program, we will need to install the Python 3 on our Windows environment. So open up your Google Chrome, type in Python 3 and click on Download Python. It will lead you to the official page of the Python programming language, and it will tell you to download the latest version for Windows. In this case, it says that the latest stable version is 3.8.2. We do not want to download this one, since the Python version 3.8 has some problems with some of the libraries that we're going to use. Therefore, we're going to install the version 3.7.6. or basically any 3.7 version that you can find, or below. It doesn't really matter as long as it is Python 3 and as long as it is relatively new version. This one came out around 3 months ago, so it will still be good to use. I'm not going to use the 3.7.7 version because it came out a few days ago and there might be some libraries that still are not supported by the newest version, therefore it is always good to go one version back. So click on Python 3.7.6. You can scroll all the way down and you can simply just pick which installer you want to download. In my case, I'm going to download the Windows x86 64 executable installer for Windows 64-bit. If you click on it right here, it will start downloading and it will download in just a few seconds. Once it finishes, you can open it up, show in folder, run it straight away. In my case, it will ask me to upgrade the version since I already have Python 3 installed. Therefore, I'm just going to go to the Customize installation. You want to check all of this. The most important thing is to make sure that you install pip, since we're going to need it to install different libraries. Once you click on Next, you want to click right here, Add Python to Environment Variables. So make sure that you check that, and then you can click on Install. It will install Python 3 inside of this library. Now, by adding Python to the environment variables, you should be able to run Python 3 from any directory after the installation. In case you cannot do that, make sure that you add the Python 3 to the path manually, and don't worry, I will leave a video in resources on how to do that. Okay? Since I already have Python 3 installed, I will click cancel right here. I don't want to install it twice. And after the installation, if you open up your command prompt and type Python, it should open up Python for you. As you can see, the version is Python 3.7.6 and we got it open inside our command prompt. Okay, so let's exit this. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to install a library which is called PyInstaller. Now that library we are going to use throughout the course in order to compile all the Python programs to exe. So just type in your command prompt pip3 install and then PyInstaller. Click enter. For me that is already being done. As it says right here, requirement already satisfied, therefore I already have it installed. For you, it will download this library and you should be good to go. Okay? Once you do all of that, we're set to go and we can start coding our keylogger. Now keep in mind, in case you do not have a Windows environment, I will link some videos down below in the resources where you can follow the tutorial and install Windows as a virtual machine. It doesn't really matter whether it is a virtual machine or a physical machine. All we need Windows for is to test our programs and to compile them. So we will compile them to the exe on the Windows machine, and we will also test them on our Windows machine, because our programs that we're going to code are going to attack Windows machines mostly. Alright, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and in the next video we're going to get straight into coding. Welcome back. Let's start our keylogger. I already created the project in my PyCharm, so you should do the same, and after you do that, go into the new and create a new Python file. We can call it simply keylogger.py. Right at the beginning, there are two libraries that we are going to need in order to complete this program. One of them is a standard library that comes with Python, which is the OS library, and the second one is a library that will allow us to automate the process of capturing keystrokes. And that library is called pyinput. So we are going to import it right here from pyinput.keyboard. We want to import the listener, which will listen for our keystrokes. Now right away we can notice that this library does not exist, therefore open up your terminal and pip3 install pyinput. Now one more thing is that our keylogger can be both used for Windows and Linux. First of all, we are going to test it in Linux environment, and then right after it we're going to transfer it to Windows, compile it, and then test it there as well. Okay, so let's close this. Now that we got the library installed inside of our virtual environment, we will start off right away with creating of our listener object that will allow us to capture keystrokes, and you actually create it similar as you open a file. So you use the with command, but instead of with open you type here with listener, and in the brackets you specify the actual function that you want to execute while the listener is running. So we're going to call that function onPress, and we're going to call the object listener. Then what we want to do throughout our entire program is type here listener.join. This will start our listener, and now what we're left to do is code our onPress function. And what our onPress function should do is it should actually store all the keystrokes that the target inputs inside of a file that we're going to create. Now we also want to make sure that we hide that file so that the target cannot find it on their machine. Alright, so let's start off with the onPress function. We first of all need to define it, so def onPress, and this function of course has to take an input of keystrokes. So we'll simply just type it short right here, key. This is each character that the target will input will represent this key. And for this function we're going to need two global variables, which we're going to create right at the beginning of the program. One of them is going to be a list, and it will be called keys. So this keys list will store multiple keys at the same time and store them one by one inside of a file. And we will also need a variable called count. And you will see in just a second why we need the count variable. Make sure that you set it to 0 and the keys list will be empty for now. One more thing that we need to do inside of our onPress function before we code it, we need to make sure that we call the global variables, which are keys and count. So global keys, count will refer to the Python that we are using these two variables and not local variables inside of this function. Okay? Right away, first thing that we want to do, since our listener is started, and if we get to this function, that means that a key has already been inputted inside of a keyboard and has to be processed. Therefore, we will straight up add that key to the keys list. So keys.append. Append is a function that allows us to add elements to the list, and we want to append the key element or the character that was inputted inside of a keyboard. After it, for each character, we want to increase the count variable by 1, and we do that by specifying count plus equals 1. And after this we want to store this key inside of a file that will store all keystrokes. Well, how we can know if a key has been inputted? Well, if the count variable is not 0, that means a key has been inputted, therefore we're going to check if count is bigger or equals to 1. We will straight away set count back to 0, and then we can create a function which will be called write file, and we will write keys to the file. And also right after it we want to make sure that we add keys to be equal to an empty list. And just so you can understand this, the reason why we're adding keys to be an empty list right after we write them to the file is because we don't want to write same things twice. So for example, let's say the target inputs something in their keyboard, we go to process this key, we append the actual key or the character inside of the keys list, we increase the count by 1, then we write those keys to the actual file, and if we don't clear the keys list, next time that the target inputs something, they will also write the first thing as well as the second thing that they typed in. So we will have everything doubled up. And if they write it the third time, the first two things will be tripled up. Therefore, we're just going to store unnecessary information or unnecessary keys multiple times. So that is why we set the count to be equal to 0 and keys to be empty right after we write it to the file. Okay? Now, this is the entire onPress function, and in the next video we're going to see how we can write them to the file, and we will also see how we can write some of the special characters that cannot be printed in a file. Okay, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and I will see you in the next lecture where we are going to code our write file function. Take care, bye. Welcome back. Let's continue coding our keylogger. So what we did by now, we created a listener which will listen for the keystrokes that the target inputs. It will process them inside of the onPress function, which will process the keys one by one. It will add them to the keys list, and then it will write them to the file. And this is the function that we're left to code. Right after it writes them to the file, it will empty both the list and it will set the count variable to be equal to 0, so we can make sure that we write the next characters correctly. Alright, so let's code the write file function, and we can code it, well, let's code it below the onPress, why not? Right here we can define it, so define write file, and as we can see right here, it takes one parameter which is keys. So let's call it that as well, keys right here. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to open up our file where we are going to write it. Now here is where the program starts being a little bit different for Linux systems and for Windows systems. And let me show you what I mean. So at the beginning of the program, right below the keys and the count variable, we also want to create another variable which will be called path. This path variable will store the name of the actual file that we want to open up and write keys to. So for Linux, we can simply just type the file name, whatever we want. Let's call it something that won't trigger the target if they see it. So we type something like process manager.txt. Now we need to think about it. If a target sees a file called like this, they will most likely think that it is some type of a Windows file and they will not open it. So this would be the path variable if you want to store it in Linux, or if you're running this program in Linux. But if we want to actually run it in Windows, we're going to add another path variable which we will set as a comment until we get to run it inside of a Windows environment. So path will be equal, and here is where we use the OS library. Now we can do the same thing and call it process manager if we want, but we also want to make sure that we hide the file. For example, if target runs our keylogger onto the desktop, the process manager.txt will be created in the desktop directory, and we do not want that because they will notice straight away after they run the file there will be a process manager.txt file that is being created right here on the desktop. So we want to hide it a little bit. Well, the best way where we can hide it, or the best place where we can hide it, is inside of the app data folder. It is a hidden folder inside of a Windows environment. Let me show you how you can get to it using the command prompt. If you open up the command prompt and you navigate to the directory of your own account, so c/user/ and then the name of your own account, if you type cd app data, it will lead you to the app data, and if I type dir, which is the same command as ls, just in Windows, we will see three different directories: local directory, local low directory, and roaming directory. Now our file will be saved in the roaming directory. If I go to the roaming directory and type dir right here, here is some random files that are stored inside of this directory. And I can promise you that your target will never find this file and never find this directory unless they're specifically looking for it. Okay? And you might notice as well that I have already processmanager.txt right here. That is because I already tested the file before. So let me delete it using the del command. So delete processmanager.txt. And if I type there once again, the process manager is no longer here. Okay, so here is the place where we are going to save our file, which will capture keystrokes. Okay, so let's close this. And how we can specify to Python that we want it to be saved inside of that directory? Well, we can use the OS library and we can use the os.environ method, which allows us to specify between the square brackets the name of the actual directory where we want to store it. So we want to specify between these square brackets and between the single quotes app data. And right after it we want to concat this process manager, so we want to add plus. Before we close this off, let me just see whether everything is correctly. If I remove the hash, we want to specify first os.environ and then app data plus and then 2 backslashes, because this is Windows, we need to specify 2 backslashes and then processmanager.txt. Okay? So once again, this line will be used if you want to run the keylogger inside of a Windows environment, and this line will be used if you want to run it inside of a Linux environment. Now for hiding this program inside of a Linux, well, you can simply just do something like root and then processmanager.txt, and then the actual program will not be in the same directory as your keylogger. But there is no need to do that because this keylogger is mainly focused on Windows machines. So let me just first of all add hash right here because we are going to test it first on the Linux machine. But before we even test it, we need to code our write file function. Okay, so now that we got our path specified at the beginning of the program, we can open that file for writing. So with open, and we specify that we want to open path, and the mode that we want to open it is neither reading or writing. We actually want to append to the file, because if you open it for writing, every time you write a new thing, the previous thing will be overwritten. And if you open it for appending, well, then we can simply just concat different characters and make it whole, and make it save everything that the target has inputted. So we're opening it for appending, and we're opening it as file. Or we can simply just short it up. Since we're going to use this file a lot throughout this function, we can call it just f, okay? Once we open the file, we want to iterate over the keys list, because remember, before we empty out this list, inside of that keys list are all the characters that the target has inputted. So we want to go in a for loop, so for key in keys. First, what we want to do is create a variable called k to be equal to string from the key character, and we want to replace the single quotes with nothing. And the reason why we're using this replace function and replacing a single quote with nothing is because by default this PyInput library will print the keys one by one, and they will all be separated by single quotes. Therefore, we do not really want that. We want to replace those single quotes with nothing, so we can have normal words and not every character split by this single quote. Alright, so once we polish the actual key, we can check for some special characters, such as, for example, if key.find, and if we find the key to be called backspace, and if that is greater than 0, and simply what this means is if you press backspace on your keyboard, the PyInput will print to the screen that you pressed backspace, like this. So all we want to do is simply just, instead of printing or writing backspace, we want to write it with the space in between. So we're going to write it like this, backspace, and add another empty space at the beginning and at the end, so we can differentiate it from the other characters. And then for the next character, we can check for enter. So if key.find, and if we find enter, and that is greater than 0, which means enter has been inputted, we want to print the new line character, because every time you are writing something in your keyboard and you press enter, it will go to the new line, it will not print out anything. Therefore, we want to do the same thing with our keylogger, and we want to write a new line character, which will specify a new line inside of our path file. Alright? Another character we want to cover is the shift character, so if key.find, and if we find shift, to be greater than 0, we want to write the same thing, so we want to write shift just with spaces at the beginning and at the end, so we can differentiate it between different characters, so we don't get something like this, hello shift world. So if this is just an example, what would be printed if we didn't do this, we would get something like this. If the target inputs hello world, we would get in our file hello shift world. And with our program, we managed to make it look like this. So now we know that the target inputted hello and then pressed shift for the W, so the W will most likely be capital if we remove this shift. Alright? So that is the only reason why we're doing it, for the backspace and for the shift character. And another important character that we need to cover is the space character. If key.find, and if we find the space character to be greater than 0, we want to write an empty space like this, because the space character simply just means space between two different words. And last but not least, if we find key.find caps lock to be greater than 0, we want to write with a space at the beginning, caps lock, and space at the end. And why we are writing caps lock is because we want to make sure that we know when the target is inputting capital letters. For example, it can be useful if the target was inputting a password. Therefore, if we see the caps lock printed inside of our file, we know that the future characters are going to be capital letters. And in any other case, for any other character, which is going to be simply letters, we want to print them or write them to the file. Now I just noticed that all of these if statements have to be else if statements. So else if, else if, else if. This one also has to be else if, and the last one will also be else if. Key.find, and if we find simply key, then we will write that key to the file. So f.write k. Okay? And remember, k is simply just the key that we converted to the string and replaced a single quote with empty space, because the characters would be written something like this: H, E, L, and then L. Oh, so we don't want them to be written like this. We want to remove all of these single quotes so they can be printed out like this. Okay? And this is the entire keylogger. We managed to finish it up in this video, and in the next video we're going to test it on both Linux and Windows machine. Okay? So thank you for watching this tutorial, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Welcome back everybody, and let's test our program to see whether it works in both Linux and Windows. Okay, so first of all, as I mentioned before, we're going to test it in Linux first. What we are expecting for this program to do is to start running and then create this processmanager.txt file and write all the inputted keystrokes to this file. Let's see whether it works. If we open up our terminal, we enlarge everything so we can see it better. Then we navigate to the Keylogger project, so cd pycharm projects and then Keylogger, type ls right here, and let's run it with Python 3. Python 3 keylogger.py, and of course it will tell us that there is no module named PyInput, and that is because we only installed it inside of this virtual environment. Therefore we need to pip3 install it inside of a regular terminal as well. So pip3 install PyInput. It will install and download the library for us, and then this program should be good to go. Here it is. Alright, so let's try to run it once again. Python 3 keylogger.py, and it seems to work. The keylogger has been started. Nothing is being printed to the screen, but if we go and, for example, inside of our PyCharm, type right here, hello world, and then we close our keylogger with Ctrl+C, type ls, we will have the process manager.txt inside of this directory. If we try to cat it to see what's the contents of the process manager, we will see hello world and the C which we used to close the program. Okay, so our keylogger works on Linux. But this is the least important thing. This is a keylogger that you will most likely never run in Linux unless you really need to. This is mainly focused on Windows, so let's see whether this will work on Windows. Now, since this is the first time that we're going to run a program on Windows and compile it there, I will go step by step so we don't miss anything. First, what you need to do is you're going to need the USB drive, or you can simply just transfer the file over Apache 2, but I'm going to use a USB drive to transfer the file from the Kali Linux to my Windows 10 machine. What you need to do is go to the devices, go to the USB, and simply import your USB device or USB drive into your Kali Linux. Let me lower this as well. And this icon right here should pop up as soon as it is imported. And all you need to do is copy the file. So cp is the command, copy keylogger.py to your USB drive. And let me just find where it is located. cd-rom. Now, probably before you actually try to copy it, you need to open the USB. So it gets detected by Kali Linux. So let's double click it. Here it is. This is the directory where it is at. So you can simply just use your terminal to copy keylogger to the media /root and / the name of your USB drive. Click on enter and it will copy the program for you. Once you do that, you can unplug your USB drive. So go to the devices, USB, and then uncheck your USB device and go to your main machine or Windows machine, whether it is a virtual or physical, it doesn't matter. You want to find the actual file that you copied to the USB drive. Here it is. Paste it to the desktop of your Windows machine and go open up your command prompt. Once you do that, first of all, make sure you have Python 3 installed, like we did in the first lesson of this project, and now you want to compile this program. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, navigate to the directory where the program is. If I type there, here is our keylogger.py. Let us clear the terminal. cls is the command to clear the terminal, and the command to actually compile the program to the exe is pyinstaller. Then the name of the program, in my case, keylogger.py. And we want to use two different options that pyinstaller allows us to use, which is we want to create a file to be one file, so it doesn't depend on some libraries or other files inside of a directory. Therefore, we will create it to be one file, and we do not want it to open console. We want it to be silent, so we'll specify no console and click on enter. This will compile the program, and you will see it will create some of the directories and files right here onto our desktop. Don't worry about them at the moment. Let us wait for this to compile, and then we're going to explain them what they are. Okay, so the compiling of the program has completed successfully, as it says right here. And now we got these 4 directories and files onto our desktop. These 3, which are the PyCache, the keylogger.spec, and the build, are something that you can delete right away. So you can simply just delete them. The only directory that we're interested in is this dist directory. If we open it up, inside of it, we will have the keylogger.exe, which is the compiled version of our keylogger. If we go to the right click and then properties, you will see that this actual type of file is application or .exe, which means that it can be ran on any Windows machine. If we double click on it, well, it seems like nothing will happen, and that is good. That means our program is running silently in the background. There is nothing being opened, and I assure you that our keylogger is already ran and it is sniffing for keystrokes. How can we check that? Well, let's type something in the command prompt, for example, hello world, what are you up to? And you will see right away that we get the process manager right here printed up. In order to close this program, we cannot simply just Control-C, because if we check right here on the desktop, we do not have any console running our file, so we need to go to the task manager, find the keylogger.py or .exe, and simply just close it. So we want to end task. Then if we go to the process manager, we can see everything that the target has inputted during the running of the keylogger. So here is the hello world, what are you up to, and then shift task manager, which I didn't complete because it already showed it right here in the start button. Therefore our keylogger works on Windows as well. But remember what we said, we don't really want our process manager to be seen right here on the desktop, therefore we can delete it right away and we can compile a different version of our keylogger. So let's delete all of this, including this. We don't need it anymore, so let's delete it. Go to our Kali Linux, and now what we want to do is we want to nano the keylogger.py. We want to put a hash onto this path right here, which is path equals process manager, and we want to unhash the path equals os environ plus process manager.txt. Then Control-O and enter to save, and then Control-X to exit. Then we need to do the same process, so let's do it quick. We need to import our USB device, start it up in our Kali Linux, and then copy the keylogger to the USB device. Wait. Copy keylogger, well, not CD, we want to copy the keylogger to the media, root, and then the USB drive. We want to unplug the USB drive. Open it up. Find the keylogger, here it is. Open the command prompt in order to compile it. Navigate to the directory where the keylogger is and run the same command as before, which is the py installer, then the name of the file, keylogger.py, -- one file, -- no console. Click on enter. It will perform the same process of compilation of the program as before, and then we should have our final version for now. Keep in mind, this is for now. We are going to upgrade this keylogger later on, but for now this should be more than enough. And let's see whether we manage to hide our process manager.txt file. Okay, so it has completed successfully. Let us lower this. We can delete the keylogger as well as these three files. Remember, we don't really need them, so we can delete them. We only need this. Paste it to the screen and run it. Once again, nothing is being opened. We can only see the file, the program being ran inside of our task manager right here. And now if we start typing something, for example, today is a good day, and then enter. And for example, let's go to Internet Explorer and let's visit paypal.com. Go to the login and we type email test@gmail.com. Next, and then password can be password 123. Oops, I think I pressed 4, doesn't even matter. Click on login. Of course that account does not exist, but if we close our keylogger and navigate to the directory where the process manager.txt is and Remember, it is in the directory of c/users/ the name of your account, and then cd app data to change directory to the app data, and then cd roaming. And if you type dir inside of that directory, you will have processmanager.txt. In order to print the content of this file, we can use the type command in our command prompt. So type processmanager.txt and press enter. And here is everything that we inputted into the keyboard while the keylogger was running. Today is a good day. Then I typed PayPal in order to find the PayPal. Then typed the email address, which is test, and used shift in order to create the @ character gmail.com. And the password was password1234. Okay, so our keylogger works correctly and we managed to hide the process manager. With this, we finish up this project of creating keylogger, and in the next project, which is probably going to be our biggest project, we're going to create the backdoor with multiple different functions, such as, for example, running keylogger, capturing screenshots, executing commands, and so on and so on. So that will be our biggest project, and let's get straight into it inside of our next section. See you there. Bye.